Hey everyone. Today I thought I would react to the latest Strange Eons video that she did on real online vampires. To the screen, as you can see, I have her channel pulled up here. It's Vampires on the Internet. I have watched this video once before, and that's kind of what gave me the idea to react to it. Um, Something to note, I was involved in the online community for most of the time period that she is describing in this video. I got involved into the forum culture in like 2003. I got out around 2010, 2011, about the time that everybody started moving to Facebook, of all places. And everybody sort of gave up on the forums. That's also about the time that, so she mentions Joseph Laycock's book in this video quite a bit, and that is the time period that he was primarily researching the community. So a lot's happened since then, and I'll get into that as we watch through the video, and I plan on pausing and giving my take on a few things. I'm not going to play the entire video. You should go to her channel and watch the video for yourself. I'm only going to sort of react or respond to stuff that I think needs any sort of reaction to, because she really did do a good job on this video. It's completely fair to the community, fair representation, humorous take on things that needed a little bit of a humorous take. So it's an excellent video. Go watch it on her channel. Please give her the views. But there were a few things in it that I wanted to sort of react or respond to. So with that said, let's get into it. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to mention was my camera was blocking the first ingredient, but it's red wine. I did want to say that I do enjoy a bloodbath cocktail, but I'm a little upset that she opted to use triple sec instead of Chambord. I prefer Chambord, so red wine, cranberry, Chambord. You can use the lime if you want. You can put a little bit of vodka in there if you want it to be a little bit stronger. But yeah, I'm not a fan of replacing Chambord with triple sec, but that's just my preference. Let's continue.
Do you like vampire stories? I will warn you, these aren't the ghastly creatures of folklore. These are very cool, modern vampires, who inhabited early internet forums, a unique subculture of the 90s, and who might still be lurking in your midst if you look hard enough. That pretty much as soon as the vampire became a cultural phenomenon, real people began identifying with these figures in a pretty serious way. And vampire fandom was serving as an incubator for this new way of understanding oneself through the lens of the vampire. The premier source on real vampires is Joseph Laycock's Vampires Today: The Truth About Modern Vampirism, which was
Excellent book. They did not do it they kind of did it a disservice with this particular cover art, but it is actually a really good book. It's I want to say runs you around $30. I think you can get it new. I think you can get it new for around $30. I read it, I don't know, like a year or so ago. I lived through a lot of this stuff, or had heard the histories laid out in it from other people back in the day, so it wasn't really high on my priority list, but I finally picked it up and read it. It's a good book. It's if you read it, you'll see that she pulls a lot of the history of the community from this book. I would say this is probably the primary source for the video, aside from some of the web forums that she checks out later.
published in 2009. We are going to be citing this book a lot, and if you're interested in doing further research after this video, I recommend that is where you start. One of the first things that Laycock stresses in his book is that despite the extreme imagery associated with vampires, These are pretty normal people we're dealing with. The same two questions are repeated over and over. Are these people crazy, and are they dangerous? The answer to both of these questions, for all intents and purposes, is a simple no. I found that many of the problems described by vampires were the same issues I encountered while working with Atlanta's Muslim community. The media portrays us as violent criminals, and people judge us by the way we dress, were mutual complaints. I have met vampires in the fields of social work, medicine, information technology, and law enforcement. John Edgar Browning, who spent years researching the vampire communities in New Orleans and Buffalo, echoes this sentiment, that people identifying as vampires are a diverse group of pretty much regular, upstanding citizens. Oh, is the fan going? Is it going? Is it? Oh, it's still in. Oh! Oh, we lost a soldier. Okay. R.I.P. The real vampires I met in interviews.
Yeah, I was wondering. I didn't pay attention the first time I watched as to how long she actually kept those in, but they look cool. They're not super comfortable, and they're not super easy to talk in. And yeah, also to reiterate that most people in the community are just regular people. I mean, we're obviously a little strange given our interests, but we're mostly just normal people.
Ranged in age from approximately 18 to 50, represented both sexes equally, described themselves as atheistic, monotheistic, or polytheistic, self-identified as heterosexual, homosexual, and bisexual. Some were parents, married, and divorced. Unquestionably, I found the members of this community to be competent citizens, that they performed bloodletting and other similar rituals safely, and did so only with willing donors. Both Browning and Laycock come to the conclusion that the vampire community exists because it fulfills human needs that aren't being met by dominant culture anymore. Needs that are social and spiritual primarily. Laycock references Christopher Partridge's 2-volume work, The Reenchantment of the West, which has been a source for videos on this channel before. It absolutely fucks. This academic text fucks. Basically, Partridge's theory is...
She's very funny. If you have never seen any of her videos before, they're pretty much all in this sort of personality. They're very entertaining, and they're also very informative. She does videos on all kinds of like niche online subcultures from the 2000s and 2010s. Check out her channel. Like, I'm sure you'll find something that interests you.
The skepticism of institutional religion and the individualism that characterizes our time means that, to use Laycock's words, to adopt a narrative of identity prescribed to us by political leaders, family, or clergy may seem puerile or even irresponsible within modern Western culture. All of this produces a state of anxiety over essential questions such as, who am I, and what should I do? This anxiety compels us to create our own narrative of self in order to make sense of our world. The vampire community and their quest for meaning reflects our quest for meaning. In short, by studying vampires, we study ourselves.
That's a very good point. Laycock makes a very good point in there about discovering ourselves. I think that's what most people are actually after in the current age.
I just drip bloodbath on my titties? I think I did. This video setup looks like a podcast couch. I got blood all over my titties. So, theory aside, you want to know what it actually means to be a real vampire. The answer is a lot of things. To kind of give you the lay of the land of the vampire subculture, I'm going to put forth what I am calling the labels buffet. Individuals may approach the label buffet and choose almost any combination of these things that they want to in constructing their identities.
The labels buffet is a really good way to put it. I'll let her continue, but that's a really good way to put it.
It's a very choose your own adventure. First, we have the umbrella identity of vampire. The vast majority of people who identify as vampires specifically consider themselves to be psychic vampires, sometimes called energy vampires. The concept of an energy vampire...
Oh, I did also want to mention that in modern times, contemporary times, current times, it's becoming more common to spell vampire with a Y to sort of separate the real-life community from fictional representations of the vampire. But back in the day, it was usually just spelled like the conventional way, but you would tack on like real vampire in front of it, or human living vampire, or real life vampires, something to denote that you're not talking about a fictional creature or a mythological creature. So In a lot of my videos and a lot of my titles, you'll see it spelled with a Y. That's just me sort of conforming to the way that it's presented currently. But back in my day, which is the time period that she's covering in this video, we usually spelled it with an I. You didn't see the Y spelling a whole lot. You did a little bit, but it wasn't as common as it is now.
To describe just normal ass people who are really emotionally draining to be around has made its way into mainstream, like, kind of self-help and pop psychology type spaces. But what you probably don't know is that the idea of psychic vampires or energy vampires dates back to the Victorian era and evolved out of more traditional vampire folklore. Gone from the idea of a vampire being a walking corpse that drinks blood, to an undead spirit that feeds on life force, to a human-looking, or perhaps even fully biologically human and mortal being that can nonetheless feed on the energy of others. These ideas were not originated by, but were picked up by and popularized by various influencers of the 20th century occult movement. Many of these texts are still foundational to psychic vampires' understandings of themselves. Michelle Belanger, perhaps one of the most recognizable psychic vampire figures, and a very prolific writer on the subject, talks about being able to recognize herself in these sorts of early portrayals, even though they were so negative, which, yeah.
Belanger is probably one of the best known figures in the community, especially from that time period. She wrote a lot of books, most iconically the Vampire Codex, or the Psychic Vampire Codex, as it was eventually printed by Weiser. But the online version has been available on Sacred Texts for, I don't know, over 20 years. I can remember reading it on the internet back in like 2004, 2005. It's been available for a very long time. I also have the first edition of the print version that was published by Weiser. It expands a little bit on what Belanger puts out in the online version, but both are very good as far as mechanics and sort of ethics and philosophy. So, yeah, just thought I would chime in. Shout out to Michelle Belanger, an OG, very well known within the vampire community, especially the psychic vampire community.
I think a lot of queer people can relate to that one. Psychic vampires frequently report being uniquely attuned to energies, having heightened empathy. Some have reported being able to heal other people by draining their negative energy away. So vampires don't even drink blood? You scream at the screen? Why am I even watching this stupid Strange Eons YouTube video? Sanguinarian. Of course vampires drink blood. Why do you think we're here? However, drinking blood does not mean chugging it by the leader.
That was an excellent segue. And drinking blood does not mean chugging it by the liter. I know that there are some people that might disagree with that. When she gets into the blood practices, I'll probably be stopping a little bit, because when I came up with the idea to react to this, I asked a few people if there was anything in the original video that they thought needed, not necessarily corrected, but like added on to. And one of those things I'll bring up later on when she gets to actually showing some of the bloodletting processes.
From someone's shredded jugular. No one is doing that, because it's not.
No one is doing that. Like the drinking liters of blood thing, some people might be doing that, but nobody's doing it from anyone's jugular. That's not a thing. That's murder. Don't do that.
Not safe. It is not safe for anyone to lose a lot of blood, nor is it safe to consume in large amounts. Say it with me, kids. That's how you get iron toxicity.
Okay, so I did want to stop here. Again, sorry for all the interruptions, but the iron toxicity thing, I don't know why it's such a peeve for me, but you see it brought up a lot. Iron toxicity in the scope of like drinking enough blood to give yourself iron toxicity is virtually impossible. And I say virtually because there are some like genetic conditions like hemochromatosis, which is like a liver condition. It makes it difficult for your body to process iron. And so like, yeah, okay, you can overload your body with iron if you have a condition like that. But generally speaking, you can overdose on iron, but most poisoning cases of iron are from like toddlers that get a hold of like the iron pills, like the iron vitamins. Adults can obviously poison themselves with those too, but you would really have to try. As far as poisoning yourself or giving yourself iron toxicity from drinking blood, everything that I've been able to read on the subject is that heme and hemoglobin, which is the part of the blood that actually contains iron, is processed in the body differently than what you might say elemental iron, like the ferrous oxide or whatever they use in the iron supplement pills. It's processed differently. So there's debate on this one way or the other, but a lot of people with way more invested in drinking blood than me have looked into it. We're talking people that drink comparatively large amounts of blood fairly regularly and have no ill effect from it. So when I say that you would really have to try like very hard to poison yourself drinking blood, you probably would. It's similar to like poisoning yourself drinking water. You would really, really, really have to try. It's possible to do, but you would really, really, really have to be devoted to it. The amount of blood that most sanguinarians drink does not approach anywhere close to the amount that it would take to cause the average person, obviously a normal healthy person, any sort of problem. So yeah, that said, I'm not a doctor of any kind, so if you plan on partaking in these practices, do your due diligence, do your research, make sure you don't have any underlying health conditions, and make sure your donor does not have any underlying health conditions either, because she does make a good point. It would be very bad for the donor to be drawing liters of blood from them at a time. It's just not good for people to lose that amount of blood. So yeah, she makes good points here, but I wanted to stop and talk about the iron toxicity thing because I see it repeated so much. And like, yes, iron toxicity is a thing, but iron toxicity from drinking blood is not quite as cut and dry. So yeah.
Not to mention all of the diseases that are communicable via blood. There is heavy emphasis on consent and safety in the vampire community. You don't want to be sharing blood with some weirdo you just met in the club bathroom. You want to know that they get tested regularly. You want to make sure everything is sanitary. John Edgar Browning, the researcher who immersed himself in those vampire communities for several years, even volunteered himself as a donor to document the process.
I like to think I have a pretty good grasp on human vampirism after now 10 years of doing field work.
More often than not, I'll use the backside of the shoulders. I poke a series of holes, and those holes actually provide me enough.
There we go. You ready?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
Some of Laycock's interview subjects told.
So that brings me to another point about blood and sanguinarians. Scalpels and lancets they're still used, but most serious sanguinarians that need to consume in a large volume, they've moved to phlebotomy. They've just moved to just straight venipuncture. So I don't believe that that's really touched upon in this video, which was another thing that I had asked some people about. And they had remarked that there doesn't seem to be any mention of phlebotomy or venipuncture. So yeah, sanguinarians that consume blood in any appreciable amount have mostly gotten phlebotomy training, and they do it that way now. Lancets are more like baby's first sang experience for the most part. Scalpels, if you are actually making cuts, sterile scalpels seem to be the way to go. But yeah, most people that require huge amounts of blood, comparatively huge amounts of blood, have moved to phlebotomy, needles, blood bags, that sort of thing.
Him that some sanguinarians use animal blood too, usually beef blood or bloody steaks, even blood pudding, as well as other foods that help them reduce.
I'm going to mention it because this is one of those like gotcha things that people bring up all the time. When you go to the supermarket and you buy a steak, the juice that's in with the steak is not blood. It's something called myoglobin. there is no actual blood in the meat that you buy at the supermarket. It's all bled at the slaughterhouse. That said, though, a lot of vampires, sanguinarians do report that rare or even blue steak does something for their craving. But I just thought it would be mentioned because it ends up being one of those whole like gotcha things that people that are skeptical of the community bring up. Yeah, there is no like actual blood in the meat that you buy at the supermarket. It's something called myoglobin. But just thought I would throw that out there because it's kind of glossed over here. But I did see it in the comments the first time I watched this video. Somebody mentioned it.
Cravings when blood isn't available. Curiously, chocolate was the most common after animal blood. Juice, herbal tea, and red wine were also popular. A pair of vampires in London create a drink of ersatz blood out of orange and tomato juice that had been heated in a microwave. You might think orange juice is a really random substitute for blood, but it's actually not, okay? I have been down this rabbit hole because I was trying to make Count Chocula cereal with blood and a glass of blood from my Immortal for a Patreon video. So I do my creepy little Googling. Basically, the best way to simulate the taste of drinking human blood would also involve probably giving yourself iron toxicity. So unfortunately, the sort of metallic tanginess that you get with orange juice is the closest you're going to safely get. So
on that note, you could actually use orange juice, Gatorade, or your preferred electrolyte sports beverage, and beef consomme, like you buy in the condensed stuff you buy in a can. You can kind of mix all that together.
I assume in this case the orange juice is for flavor and the tomato juice is for looks, microwave for temperature. Apologies for the tangent, but I simply can't shut the fuck up if I know a fun fact. Some vampires are hybrids, meaning they're both sanguinarians and energy vampires. So if you are helping yourself to the label buffet, you can have both of these. Someone might also consider themselves to be a medical vampire, clinical vampire, awakened vampire.
We call that medical sanguinarian now, or med-sangs for short. So if you happen to come into our corners of the internet and you see people using the term med-sang or medical sanguinarian, that's what they're talking about.
Vampire are all terms that kind of mean the same thing. The idea that vampirism is a condition they were born with but had to become awakened to the reality of. Being a vampire is part of their nature. They could ignore it, but that would probably lead to a miserable life because they need to consume either blood or energy lest their health will deteriorate.
When did you know that you were...
My initial thought would be that maybe this person has a psychiatric disorder, but I don't think it's unreasonable to consider the possibility that there's an underlying medical condition.
But I'd say...
I don't think this is a passing fancy or a fad for him. He talked about the need to drink blood since childhood.
For now, the blood drinker will have to give up his own blood, which he willingly does in the name of science.
The good old days when Don Henry was on literally every reality show and talk show that you could imagine. Or at least that's the way it felt. I think it was primarily Tyra Banks and Mad House on the Sci-Fi Channel. I think those are really the two big ones. He may have been on a few others, though.
There is a temptation to dismiss the condition of vampirism as being just all in someone's mind. But what does that really mean? Like, are the mind and body separate? Not. She's
about to get into a really excellent perspective. I think it's very true to sort of the way things function, at least now within the community, where we don't get so hung up on causes as much anymore. So yeah, let's listen to what Strange has to say about this.
Not very. If someone is able to consume blood or energy and feel sustained by that, feel better from that, and they feel wrong if they don't have those things, then is it not essentially true? None of the people I interviewed gave me any reason not to believe what they were saying. Being a gay man myself, it's not like people can take my blood and see that I'm gay, but it doesn't mean that it's not real. Laycock stresses that we should understand vampirism foremost as an identity around which social and religious institutions have formed.
Yes, as an identity. That's kind of where Laycock was sort of ahead of his time on this one. But where the community currently stands, that's probably the best way to look at it, is as an identity social group. Not so much religious, but as a social identity, with lots of different labels on the buffet.
The group that he worked most closely with when researching his book was the Atlanta Vampire Alliance, or AVA, who he describes as being scientifically minded medical vampires who mostly looked like normal nerds. They were interested in doing surveys and hosting conferences, bringing together as much knowledge as possible to try and understand and define what they were experiencing.
I actually did a video like over a year ago on the Vampirism and Energy Work Research Survey and the Advanced Vampirism and Energy Work Research Survey. It's probably not my best work because I was just starting out with editing and making videos and whatnot. It's very dry because I basically just picked out the most interesting data sets and sort of talked about them a little bit, but you can probably find that on my Vampire Community playlist if you care to look at it.
Experiencing a very stark contrast to the dramatic fang-wearing people you might picture hanging around goth clubs. They almost seem to pride themselves on their complete lack of interest in goth parties and other social events. To these vampires, appearances had nothing to do with it. Dressing goth for vampires, I assume, is sort of like dressing gay for queer people. A vampire doesn't need to dress goth any more than a millennial lesbian needs to have the haircut. Doing so may be fun and help signal who you are to others in your community, but you don't need it. And yes,
it's kind of like fangs. It's fun. Some people get permanent fangs, but it's not really necessary. I also did a video on that.
Some of you may have guessed where this is going. In their view, vampires fall under the umbrella of otherkin, people who have non-human souls. Another word that I think is worth throwing on the table, the buffet, is pagan, because like I said, most vampires are spiritual and practice some form of paganism. Michelle Bellinger, for example, believes that being a psychic vampire is a part of her essential nature. She was born that way, but she also practices a spirituality which is informed by this. Psychic vampirism, human vampirism, these are, after all, concepts born out of occult movements, and still deeply linked to them. Then you have the lifestyle vampire. Someone who lives a life inspired by vampires. They probably dress like a vampire, wear fangs, hang out at goth clubs, drink their partner's blood, but they don't believe there's any reason to do those things other than the fact that they're fun. They describe sexual and psychological gratification from consuming blood, but not an actual health need. Some lifestylers believe that there are no real vampires, and that those who claim to be vampires are mentally ill. Lifestyle vampires might additionally fall into categories like roleplayer, blood fetishist, or goth. Attraction to blood is called homosexuality, by the way. Goes far beyond the vampire community. So, quiz time. Let's lay out some hypothetical guys.
This is a genius segment. This is probably one of the best parts of this entire video.
You might have someone who calls themselves a vampire because they love dressing goth and they think blood is sexy and the word vampire describes their lifestyle in a fun way. And they might say, I can't believe how far mentally ill people are taking this, thinking they actually need blood to survive. That's crazy. And then you might have someone who considers their vampirism a very real, almost medical condition who says, OMG Elvira, you're such a shallow poser. You think being a vampire is about going to goth clubs and being kinky? Ugh, baby bats. Real vampires don't need to be so performative. It's just who we are. Sorry, you're calling us fake vampires? For what? Having fun? Having a sense of drama? How about you leave your mom's basement sometime, Jared? Listen guys, we're all valid. We are just different. According to Laycock, one vampire going by the name Vlad said in an interview, look, if you drink blood and it's a sex deal, don't call yourself a vampire. You're a blood fetishist. Admit it, dig it, live it. Wait, some of you guys are seriously drinking blood? That's kind of unsanitary. Not to mention dangerous? Sorry, you licked the bloody packaging of a raw steak because you were craving blood? That is too far for me. You need to learn how to feed on psychic energy, dude, okay? I can rec you some great books. Real vampires drink blood. Consuming blood is only efficacious because blood serves as a medium for psi energy. So you agree? So you agree it's literally all the same shit? Can we stop arguing?
I'm inclined to believe that the whole back and forth with the dolls, she may have actually pulled that from an old forum, because it's extremely accurate. Like I can tell that she did research beyond Laycock's book. It's very obvious.
All of us are just making ourselves up. So much of what you and I both consider innate and unchangeable about ourselves is, to a great degree, still constructed by culture.
another great point that she makes. We are all writing our own story, and we all have our own little head canons about ourselves.
The idea of being gay is a 20th century invention. Sure, same-sex attraction has always existed. People were known to be capable of homosexual activity. Show me the medieval dildos, please. But the idea that homosexuality was an unchangeable part of someone's identity wasn't really a thing until early 20th century sexologists began to study queer people. Similarly, a lot of mental health conditions weren't given words until recently. We use the word lesbian because an ancient writer who talked about desire for other women was from the island of Lesbos. If I can be a lesbian, then why can't someone be a vampire?
I used to catch so much shit back in the day for making that comparison. And I understand why the people that were trying to criticize it were, because they were seeing vampirism as something that was adopted, not something that was innate, versus homosexuality as being something that was innate and not adopted. But, I mean, Strange pretty much nailed it right there. If we're comparing apples to apples identity labels, like, she's got a good point, at least to me.
Laycock writes, I speculate that if the psychic vampire did not exist as a category, individuals with this sort of experience would not be vampires. Instead, they would be something else. Laycock also tells us that every vampire he interviewed described an unhappy childhood. The Atlanta Vampire Association conducted a survey of hundreds of vampires from all over the world and found that 54% report suffering some kind of childhood abuse, which is an insanely high number compared to the general population. So, vampirism is meant to heal something. But rather than condescendingly dismiss vampires as mentally ill snowflake attention seekers, as so many writers did before him, Laycock proposes vampirism as a technology of the self. Foucault? In My Vampires? Yes, sorry. The vampire represents the opportunity to create oneself as not just an outsider, but a beautiful, powerful outsider on
I've written a little bit and made audio versions of it before about how the vampire is transformation, and I think that touches a little bit on my my sort of thinking about it. There used to be this discourse that somewhat cliche, that vampirism, or the vampire condition, whatever you want to call it, was some sort of curse. It was a detriment. It was not something to seek out. It was something to actively try to deal with and get rid of if you could. But I think that as a catalyst for transformation, like Strange mentioned about the absurdly high rate of childhood abuse, I think that at least in that case, it does sort of function in sort of like a healing way, as a transformative aid to become, I don't know, something other than what you started as, hopefully for the better.
One's own terms, and to maybe even find a family of people who understand that. Now, the history of the vampire community is extremely nebulous. Nobody fully understands its origin, not even vampires. 1960s was when fandom in the modern sense really started kind of happening. The character of Barnabas Collins from Dark Shadows was very compelling to a lot of people. The vampire was beginning to shift from monster to endearing misfit who resonated with a lot of human misfits, and by the 70s and 80s there was a full-on vampire media boom happening. Lestat had been released upon society, and nothing would ever be the same again. If you've noticed that a lot of vampires tend to be goths and nerds and witches, that's because they came together for the first time in spaces meant for goths and nerds and witches. We also cannot talk about the real vampire community without talking about a role-playing game called Vampire the Masquerade.
Yes, we absolutely cannot talk about the vampire community without talking about Vampire the Masquerade. Still to this day, highly influential in a lot of in-jokes, honestly. But some of the terminology that was adopted during the 90s still sticks around just because we have not come up with any better terms for it. But if you hang out in some of the communities now, you'll see frequent references, usually in a humorous manner, to certain clans in Vampire the Masquerade, or other types of references like that.
Masquerade. Vampire role-playing started with like DIY games based around Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles universe, and then in 1991, White Wolf Games released Vampire the Masquerade, inspired by and capitalizing on the Anne Rice craze. And it was wildly successful. Now, real vampires absolutely do not want to be confused with role players, and role players absolutely don't want to be confused with real vampires. They have some differences. However, we cannot avoid the fact that the vampire subculture and Vampire the Masquerade are deeply entangled. The two spaces could be very difficult to tell apart in the beginning. Enter Father Sebastian Van Houten, a dentist.
All right. Lot to unpack on this one. I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds on it, but this was another thing that people brought up, people that watched the video, that they brought up the fact that Strange mentions Sebastian, but it's obvious that she's probably not kept up with recent events, or if she has, she didn't mention it. If all you go off of is books and articles and interviews and forum posts from like the 2010s, then I'd say this is pretty accurate, but it should be known that there have been a lot of unsavory accusations leveled at Sebastian for a long time, really. Some of the more serious ones in recent years, but there have always been allegations that he was kind of like a shady businessman, something of a huckster. There were allegations of plagiarism, and in recent years, there have been several people that have come out about him taking advantage of them in business relationships, and also in other types of relationships. It has to do with assault. And these are allegations. As far as I know, there hasn't been any litigation, but I don't really know, and Sebastian does not talk about it. So all you really have is the people accusing him. But there's another channel on YouTube called Cults to Consciousness, and I think they have 4 interviews. There are 4 episodes, each with 4 different people that have come forward to accuse Sebastian of various things. One of them is about basically how they did a bunch of work for him and then didn't get paid, like a predatory business association. 2 of them are related to the more serious assault SA allegations. And then there was another interview which was basically an outline of his shady behavior and plagiarism and having people ghostwrite for him and not compensating them. I'm not claiming that any of this is true, but if you're interested in the more recent allegations about him, go check out Cults to Consciousness on YouTube. I believe you should be able to find it if you search like Cults to Consciousness, Vampire Cult, something like that. They're all tagged with the word vampire, so this should be pretty easy to find.
Assistant whose interest in vampires started in the role-playing scene. He made a name for himself as the Fang Smith.
Good evening, this is Father Sebastian here at the Fang Shop, New York City, inside the Halloween Adventure Shop. This is the Vampire Central. This is where Sabretooth's headquarters is in New York City, and Sabretooth is a company which makes custom-made fangs and opticals. Basically what we promote is the vampire lifestyle in tradition and philosophy, which is basically based on taking the vampire mythology and turning it into a tangible, real-world experience.
As Vampire the Masquerade role-playing and the vampire club scene were taking off, the Fang business was booming. Father Sebastian got a job as a club promoter and used his resources to organize extravagant vampire balls that became all the rage in the community. At one point, they were holding weekly vampire nights at a gay bar. Weekly? Explode every smartphone right now. We need to go back to 1996. Father Sebastian formed the Sanguinarium, an alliance of vampire houses all over the US who could share information and come together to organize events. Vampire houses of the Sanguinarium were to observe the Black Veil, a code of ethics penned by Father Sebastian. In its first incarnation, it was very nearly identical to the vampire code in the fictional universe of Vampire the Masquerade. Michelle Bellinger helped him to rewrite it into the Black Veil 2.0, specifically to distinguish it from the role-playing game. So we have a lifestyle vampire club promoter who started as a role player, and a real psychic vampire working together to establish this community. So the prevailing idea of this vampire scene of the 90s that was centered in New York was that vampirism was a lifestyle choice. But there were people in there, like Bellinger, who claimed to be real psychic vampires, and they all kind of coexisted and contributed to this conversation about what vampirism meant. That wouldn't last forever, though. By the time Laycock was researching his book, those two philosophies were not coexisting very well anymore. Bellinger and Sebastian were no longer on speaking terms. Now I'm going to tell you about initiated vampires, and by initiated, I do mean into vampire cults. The majority of the vampire community is a loose network without much hierarchy. In fact, there is a common mistrust of authority and institutions. Vampire cults, on the other hand, are organizations with hierarchies, leaders, holy texts. They see vampirism as a spiritual path that any lowly human can be initiated into in the pursuit of power. The real vampire community and vampire cults are very separate things.
Yes and no. I've done at least one video on this type of vampirism. I typically call it like magical vampirism. But she goes over a few of the groups here in a little bit, but if you look at some of the stuff that Father Sebastian has written and you compare it to some of the things from the Temple of the Vampire, and it all sort of starts to kind of flow together. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that initiated or magical vampires or vampire cults, as she puts it, are separate from the real vampire community. There was a time when there was a huge separation, but that's what with a lot of vampire identified people participating in magical practices, being pagan, into the occult, that sort of thing. There's been sort of renewed interest in like vampiric magic and vampire religion, I guess you could put it. So a lot of people have gone back to actually look at some of these things from the Temple of the Vampire, the Temple of Set. There is a book by Don Webb called Energy Magic of the Vampire that a couple of years ago was really being recommended in the community for those that are more of an occult bent or a magical bent. So while at one time there was a good deal of separation between the two, and she'll explain some of the enmity for that. In the current community, as I kind of mentioned before during the whole label buffet thing, there's a lot of people just sort of coming together under the identity, and then we can pick and choose from our label buffet, and everybody just kind of gets along because I think we've grown beyond fighting over the minutia of things, kind of like the dress up doll animations that she had earlier in the video about, like, can we just stop arguing? We're talking about the same thing. It's not exactly like that, but I mean, it is kind of like that. Like, there's not a lot left to argue about, honestly. But I just wanted to chime in on that. Let's continue.
Vampire cults are sort of Satanism's fault. The Church of Satan, if you are not familiar, was founded by Anton LaVey in 1966, and crucially, does not involve worshipping Satan as a real deity. Satanism focuses on the biblical figure of Lucifer as kind of a model for anti-authoritarianism, individualism, curiosity, pursuit of truth. According to Laycock, a schism in the Church of Satan spawned another sect called the Temple of Set, which took a lot of the ethics and practices from Satanism, only swapped him out with the god Set to distinguish themselves, and they seem to have worshipped Set in a much more literal way. Another schism then led to the Order of the Vampire, in which initiated members sought power from astral vampire deities to become human psychic vampires themselves.
So this is kind of this goes back to what I was just saying. So yeah, the Temple of Set, the Order of the Vampire is within the Temple of Set, and I mean, you can kind of see my camera's not completely blocking it, but Lilith Aquino, who was the wife of Michael Aquino, who separated from the Church of Satan and founded the Temple of Set, Lilith Aquino is the head of the Order of the Vampire. Don Webb, the aforementioned author that wrote Energy Magic of the Vampire, he is a member of the Order of the Vampire and consequently Temple of Set. So yeah, I just thought I would elucidate on that.
Their ethics are very different from that of the real vampire community. The real vampire community, it's all about consent, it's all about ethics, whereas these guys see it as more of a method of gaining power over other people. Despite being vampires, the Order of the Vampire forbade the drinking of blood. Probably the most well-known vampire cult is the Temple of the Vampire, which, yes, is different from the Order of the Vampire. They're really hated by the rest of the vampire community for being, well, culty. While they originally portrayed psychic vampirism as a path to personal power, the Temple of the Vampire eventually began promising its members actual physical immortality, which is crazy town. Laycock stresses that vampire cults like the Temple get a lot of attention because of how extreme they are, but they are a tiny minority of people who consider themselves vampires. To join, you have to buy an expensive vampire Bible and a bunch of their other products to complete an initiation ritual. You will then get added to their mailing list. And that's kind of it. A member was once fully excommunicated for leaving a comment on Michelle Bellinger's live journal. I'm sure you can imagine how pissy they got when a member of the real vampire community leaked their vampire Bible. You are just another tragic hero type who cannot stand those more successful than you. You feed out of a need for abject survival. Temple of the Vampire members feed consciously to fuel and improve themselves, to make themselves more. You cannot learn to be something, so you punish and attack those who do. Indeed not. I violated copyright law because I wanted people to see the truth of the pathetic Temple shortcomings. I was born a Psyvamp, not like the humans like yourself the Temple teach to become energy leeches. You thought I was exaggerating with the hypothetical discourse.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. Like, yeah, no, she's not exaggerating at all. It was pretty much like that.
But it is that crazy. Speaking of vampire discourse, Father Sebastian is still one of the most visible members of the vampire community today, and he is very protective of the community's image. Blood drinking is a...
Sebastian is very protective of his own image. And that only goes as far as like his organizations, the Sanguinarium's not really a thing anymore, but like Clan Sabretooth, House Sabretooth, whatever you want to say, Eternal Night, Vampire Balls, really any of his like books, anything that he promotes, he's very protective about. But as far as the community in general, he doesn't really. He may say he does, but I've not really seen him care that much about the image of the overall community in a very long time. He's by nature a club promoter, and he's very good at self-promotion, so I'm not really going to throw shade about like him only caring about his own image, but like I think it needs to be clarified that he's most of the community is done with Sebastian, and therefore he's probably done with most of the community. That's just kind of the way that I see it.
Particularly sensitive topic for him.
It's a bit controversial, actually, in the vampire world, believe it or not.
I'd like to interrupt. Was there a discussion about blood drinking? I had to interrupt.
Yeah.
The Sabretooth clan is very concerned with this because the real vampire community has made so much trouble for us over the years.
No, you made that very
and we need to be very cautious of it.
He explains in this Vice piece that blood consumption is a cool fetish that should be done safely between consenting partners. He doesn't subscribe to the idea that vampirism is a condition. In fact, ideologically, he sort of, at some point, found himself identifying a lot with cults like the Temple of the Vampire. The problem was the Temple were assholes. So he decided to do his own, more fun cult, and called it the Ordo Strigoi Vai. So he founded the Ordo Strigoi Vai to be the Temple of the Vampire, but fun. Mixed in some other occult traditions, and there you go!
Yeah. Ordo Strigoi V or Vi is Temple of the Vampire, but fun. If you read the leaked materials from the Temple of the Vampire, then you read what Sebastian's come up with. Like it's not exactly the same. Like it's not like copy paste, but like the overall goals are more or less the same.
He's a bit of a serial plagiarist, but he does have a sense of drama, so that's a redeeming quality, I guess. Vibes absolutely all over the place, but I'm not getting personally involved in decades of vampire discourse.
Joke's on you, Strange, you just did.
Puck writes, well, the vampire community existed before the internet. The internet has allowed it to flourish like never before. Vampirewebsite.net. Vampire-friendly bar/club.
Alright, so vampirewebsite.net. I'm pretty sure she mentions how controversial this was, or this site still is. It's still up. This is one of those real vampire websites that a lot of people in the community took issue with even back in the day. And I imagine even more so now.
So there's a lot of physical criteria to being a real vampire here that I don't think all of this is widely agreed upon. I think that some
You are correct. Most of it is not widely agreed upon.
of this is unique to this person or group of people who put together this particular website. Vampire myths and facts. Real vampires don't need blood, they only need some part of blood or just energy. Myth. Some real vampires do need blood. Real vampires can fly. Myth. Sunlight kills real vampires. Extreme exaggeration. Real vampires are undead. That is a myth. Real vampires are immortal. Extreme exaggeration. Oh yes, okay, so this one is not full. I think I know why. I'm not reading the screen. I'm not looking at it, okay? I'm quizzing myself on my vampire now. It's because a lot of real vampires believe in reincarnation, and they have been a vampire in every lifetime, and they are able to unlock memories of those past lives, and so that is sort of a form of immortality. Is that what you're gonna say? Real vampires are far from being immortal, however, we do age noticeably slower, and we do survive a lot of things, but not everything that a normal person should be able to survive. Okay, so that's not what this website said, but I know there are vampires who believe the thing that I just said. Also, Liz Vampires is a long-standing real vampire website, forum, and chat with the goal of being a useful and pleasing place for those who seek knowledge or...
I don't remember visiting this particular website back in the day, but God, I miss this layout. She's going to talk about the splash screens, but like Web 1.0 was just, you had to be there.
Support. Enter. Oh my God, I love when a website has like a little landing page with an enter button. Oh my God. Enjoy the labyrinth. Yep. You'll find many of the rooms have layers and passageways. Voices of the vampire.
So if you do check out any of these old websites, your browser's probably going to scream at you that it's unsafe. But use your own discretion with that. I never ran into any problems with it, but you know, if you don't feel comfortable with it, I'm certain you could probably find a copy on the Wayback Machine, because a lot of these, as you can see by the dates on her screen, a lot of these have not been updated in a very long time by internet standards.
Vampire community, public meeting transcripts. Discussion agenda. Welcome to the first public meeting of the Voices of the Vampire Community for 2008. The purpose of the Voices of the Vampire Community is to develop friendly relations among various houses, covens, orders, organizations, and individual leaders of the vampire community to encourage cooperation in solving community-related problems. Okay, so today they're working on topics like, why do you devote your time and energy to this community? Why are you here? If you had to point to one positive or defining characteristic of the vampire community, what would it be?
I also want to mention that the VVC seems to be largely defunct as an active organization anyway. You will occasionally see members floating around in some of the communities still. If you're able to join the Vampire Community News Discord server, or possibly even the Facebook page, but I don't know about that, you're likely to see some people from way back in the day. Some of the names that were on screen previously, you'll probably still find those people. But as far as like a group that still puts out like meeting transcripts, as far as I know, they're not active any longer. And for Vampire Community News, for that matter, is mostly dead as well. So
a lot of vampires disagree about what it means to be a vampire, but it wasn't as big of a deal when everyone was hanging out at goth clubs and reading the small number of zines and newsletters catered to vampire stuff, and they all kind of had to coexist.
And we finally managed to come back to that, where everybody coexists in the same place for the most part. It's interesting how it seemed like the internet divided us there for a while, and now it did what the internet was supposed to do in the beginning and bring people together.
The advent of the internet in the 90s brought them into real conflict with each other for the first time, because while the internet has the ability to bring people together despite geography, it also has the ability to make ideological differences a lot more stark. One vampire that Laycock interviewed said that the found family aspect of the vampire community was really strong in the beginning, but he eventually withdrew from it due to the infighting, petty drama, and backstabbing that increased as the community grew and people started to covet leadership positions, and as different groups began to passionately disagree about what it meant to be a vampire.
We're actually getting back to the found family aspect of it, in my opinion, just from what I've experienced. And that's obviously a good thing. And I have noticed a lot of people that are new coming in because of how welcoming the current community is.
A big strain on vampire-vampire relations was the way that they were being portrayed in the media. When that happens, everyone kind of wants to distance themselves from that guy who was just slightly weirder than them. The vampire community was viewed by law enforcement and mainstream media as some kind of sinister, satanic underground movement, and any sort of murder or crime that involved a lot of blood or weird things done with blood or even some light cannibalism would end up with the label vampiric crime slapped on it. Most of those obviously have absolutely nothing to do with the real vampire community, but there were unfortunately a few cases that hit closer to home. In 1996, an aspiring journalist named Susan Walsh disappeared mysteriously without a trace while researching the New York vampire scene. Sensationalist headlines may have failed to mention that Walsh had recently published an expose on the Russian mafia and had confided in friends that she believed said mafia was stalking her. So,
the story of Susan Walsh is very interesting. And while she was sort of intermingling with the New York vampire scene, as Strange said, she was also doing journalism on Russian organized crime. And I want to say the last documentary I watched on the subject, there's even speculation that her, I don't know if his ex-husband, ex-boyfriend may have been involved in it allegedly. I don't think that's ever been proven. But yeah, the vampire angle is mysterious and compelling, but it doesn't really hold water under close examination.
my bet is on the mafia rather than the goth LARPers. A teenager named Roderick Farrell, who called himself a vampire, drawing on lore from popular media like Vampire the Masquerade, Vampire Chronicles, and Lost Boys, murdered a couple who were strangers to him in cold blood.
So Rod Farrell, there's been at least a couple of good documentaries on YouTube about him. Rod Farrell had a very troubled childhood, and he obviously is not representative of the vampire community, but it's pretty easy to see why, it got called a vampire murder and all this other vampire cult murder and stuff like that.
The trial, vampire media, goth culture, role-playing games, paganism were all made out to be evil, corrupting influences on our youths. Anne Rice had to issue a statement saying that it was unfortunate that some of her books were found in the car that the teens fled the scene of the crime in. Laycock suggests that maybe it was Farrell's extremely dark and abusive childhood that led him to being less than well-adjusted rather than reading about Lestat's gay antics. When he concluded his book in 2009, Laycock believed that the real vampire community had received too much exposure and media attention to ever fully, quote-unquote, go back in the coffin. In the 2000s, everyone wanted a vampire in their reality TV show or documentary. Even in the midst of massive media attention, the community is eroding instead of growing. An Atlanta Vampire Alliance member showed me a chart on his laptop measuring the amount of online activity by the vampire community over the past few years. The chart indicated that online activity had been steadily declining for several years. The community is contracting, he said. It's going offline and underground. My contact believed that as more television shows seek vampires and film interviews, the old guard has become jaded and withdrawn from the community. Laycock believed that the community was just changing, however.
And he was correct. The community was just changing because I believe that book was published in 2009. I think that's what she said at the beginning of the video. So that would have been about the time when Facebook became available to the public and not just university students. And I don't think when Laycock wrote the book, he was expecting social media to blow up like it did, because while there was less attention and interest in the community, and it looked like everybody was disappearing and going offline, that was really just the old forums were just dying because people were moving to new platforms. So even today, for whatever reason, a community that used to prize discretion very highly decided to move to Facebook, which is arguably one of the greatest invasions of privacy in human history. But that's where everybody seemed to go. They moved to Facebook groups because that was just an easier way for everybody to find each other and communicate. And then now that Facebook is kind of the domain of boomers and your aunts and grandma, it's everybody's kind of moved to the newer platforms like Discord. That's where a lot of the current, as of right now, community is hanging out. Certain communities still maintain websites. Some are still updating their websites. Project V or projectvampyre.org, for example, they still working on the website. There's a social component to the website that's separate from the Discord server, and you can post and make groups and share pictures and things. So that sort of culture is coming back. I won't say it's like full on forum culture again, but we're seeing almost like a full circle moment in the online community where everybody left the forums and sort of the slow moving sort of platforms, jumped to social media, jumped to more I don't know, does Discord count as social media? I don't know. And now we're seeing people move back to more of the I won't say completely forum based format, but more to the websites of individual groups. So yeah, it's definitely changed.
Or not actually going away. He proposes a future in which the trajectory for the real vampire community has been not unlike the gay rights movement. You know, the 19th and 20th centuries had underground secret societies for queer people, just like the 90s had secret vampire subcultures. One day soon, vampire and other kin identities will be able to exist in the open and receive mainstream approval. He touches briefly on things we're going to have to figure out as vampires integrate in society, you know? Will they receive religious protections under the First Amendment? What does it mean to raise one's children in a vampire way? This prediction on his part strikes me as wildly, wildly optimistic, you know? Maybe because it's been 17 years since his book came out and that kind of didn't happen? Vampire subculture is less visible than it was then, and other kin identities in general are still considered very strange. The vampire community still exists, sure, but it hasn't grown, and if anything, it might have shrunk since the 2000s. It certainly hasn't progressed towards the mainstream, but if you look, you will find them haunting the internet still. And that's the video. Thank you for watching. Thank you for learning about real vampires with me. I honestly have the sneaking suspicion that we've only scratched the surface here, but this video is, what, 45 minutes, an hour long already? Maybe there is more to talk about regarding the vampires. I won't write off that possibility. But anyway, that is truly all for me now. I will see you in another video very soon, my friends.
All right, so that's the video, and yeah, there is a lot more to say because I think I mentioned at the beginning where Laycock's research kind of drops off. There were a lot of things that happened after that. The community moved off of forum sites and IRC into Facebook. Now we're on Discord, and now we're slowly moving back to our own websites. So I did want to say something about the mainstream acceptance. So yeah, vampires aren't cool anymore. That's probably going to change because of the success of the Interview with the Vampire series based on Anne Rice's books that has been doing very well on AMC. I watched the first 2 seasons. Can't wait for season 3. I expect that's going to cause an uptick because there's nothing quite like the influence of Anne Rice to make vampires popular. That's probably going to increase interest. And there have, of course, been prominent vampire, I guess you would call them influencers now. Jack Townsend is one of them. He's very popular on TikTok, or relatively popular on TikTok. He's really the only one that comes to mind. Don Henry is kind of, I think he's still around. Somebody told me that he's still around on Instagram, but he's not as active. Michelle Bellinger, she's, as far as I know, she's still writing books. She has a channel on YouTube. She's got some good stuff on there. Sebastian, of course, is still active. A lot of these people from back in the day are still around. They've just maybe taken a back seat just probably because of a lot of the drama that was in the community, to be honest. But yeah, I really enjoyed this video. Go to Strange Aeon's YouTube channel and watch the video for yourself. Give her credit because the research and the editing for this video is fantastic. I would like to say that, as she mentioned at the end of the video, we still are out here. We're really not that hard to find on the internet. A Google search should pull up a lot of stuff. Myself, I'm obviously on YouTube, projectvampyre.org. You can find them over at their website, projectvampyre.org. Also the Discord server, which you can find on the website. I am on Tumblr. I will probably also post this on Tumblr. So, Strange, if you happen to see this, everybody that has seen this in the community that I'm involved in has liked it. Everybody thinks you did a fantastic job. A lot of people were already fans of your work. So, keep up the excellent videos. And if you want to come hang out with us, like, we're not that scary. We would probably really get along, actually. But yeah, I'll end it here. And until next time, take it easy, everybody.